There will be a blockade. There will not be blackmail, according to President Trump just minutes ago. Now, of course, that a lot depends upon your perspective and where you stand on what's blackmail and what's blockade and what's good negotiations. And we're going to look into all that today. And we're delighted to have with us back today to discuss all of this Scott Ritter, veteran Marine Corps intelligence officer and United Nations weapons inspector, and guy who's super tied into what's going on in this whole region here. It's got some great comments that we're going to look forward to. Scott, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Well, listen, I'm eager to get some of your views on this stuff, not just from your diplomatic experience and your military experience, but also from your connection to, a lot is going on in the region, both in the Middle East, where you have extensive experience, but also your connections to what maybe China and Russia are viewing into all this and the economics, how this is going together. So really eager to get on it. Let's jump to what just happened a few minutes ago, because President Trump out in front of the White House said, listen, this whole thing about the blockade is fine, but Iran blackmailing America, never.
What's the end game? Is it to force Iran back to the negotiating table? Is it to open up the strait so that gas prices ultimately come down?
Maybe everything. I mean, both of those things, certainly, and more. We can't let a country blackmail or extort the world, because that's what they're doing. They're really blackmailing the world. We're not going to let that happen.
Yeah, we're not going to let that happen. Okay, so let's just, as a quick reminder to our studio audience here, the only reason the strait is blocked or closed right now, prior to Trump's blocking it from the outside, is because we started a war of choice against Iran. In 47 years, they had never done this, never would have. So just let me ask you your take right off the bat that a couple of things from that soundbite I want to talk about. Well, let's look at the last part first, where Trump just declares, no, we're not going to let this happen. It's not going to be blackmailed.
Well, it's not just a war of choice. It's an illegal war of aggression. I think everybody needs to understand that there's no legitimacy at all in anything the United States is doing. Nothing. So it's so important to point this out, because everything that follows, including every statement made by the President of the United States, must be seen in the light of he is a war criminal. He is a man leading a nation in actions that have zero legitimacy constitutionally and zero legitimacy under international law. And I also want to remind people that a blockade is an act of war. He's treating this as if he has some sort of legal duty and responsibility to carry out this, that he's somehow legitimate in pursuing this. It's an act of war, literally an act of war. And again, because it's tied to nothing from a legal foundation, it's an illegal act of war. Blackmail. I mean, what does Iran hold over you, Mr. President? What is the blackmail? It seems to me what he really meant to say is that Iran has strategic leverage because Iran has outplayed this president in every way, shape, and form. I want to remind again your audience that we hear the president and Pete Hegseth speak of destruction. There's been a lot of physical destruction, but there's been almost zero destruction of meaningful strategic capabilities of Iran. Iran always went into this conflict knowing that its ballistic missile and drone capabilities would serve as the foundation of their military response. So for Pete Hegseth and the president to redefine this war as, based upon Iran's naval prowess, as if the Iranian Navy ever, positioned or postured itself to be a competitor of the United States Navy, or as an air power. No, Iran never said that it was either of those. What Iran said, and I was told by the Iranian president in person, together with the foreign minister last September, that Iran's strategic deterrence comes from their conventional ballistic missile capabilities, that this is, how they postured themselves, and this is how they would hopefully deter somebody from attacking them. But if somebody attacked, to punish the attackers. Deterrence doesn't work unless people know and understand that there will be a consequence for your actions. There are many people who believe that the Iranian missile and drone capabilities were overhyped, that Iran lacked the political will to follow through. Not anymore. Now we know that Iran has the ability, the wherewithal to employ these weapons, employ them effectively. They hammered the United States military installations in the region. They punished the state of Israel, and they sent a clear signal to the Gulf Arab states that the totality of their infrastructure is at risk should they continue to support the United States in this illegal war of aggression. So Iran holds literally all the cards. They have not been defeated at all, not even close. They're getting in fact, they were getting stronger as the war went on because their underground missile factories started kicking in. And, not only were they launching missiles, they were producing missiles. It's underground missile production capability that's immune to anything the United States does overhead. Here we have the president threatening the potential resumption of military force. I, again, want to point the following facts out. There's nothing left to bomb. Everything's underground and we can't destroy that. Anything that's above ground has zero military value. If it was of military value, we would have struck it already. So we will simply be bombing buildings, probably buildings affiliated with civilians. But no matter what, if you think at this juncture, more than 40 days into this conflict, that Iran has left anything of value in a building inside their nation, I have a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you. There's nothing in Iran to bomb. So these threats of the president that he's going to blow things up and obliterate Iran, it's just bluster.
And by the way, I'm sorry, I want to interrupt you. Just say this image, the video that Gary's showing you here. This shows how these underground bunkers or missile cities are specifically designed to survive an atomic blast. Even that is not going to take them out. I just want to reinforce that.
Yeah, look, the Iranians are some of the smartest people in the world, and they've been studying how the United States fights for more than 2 decades now, and they have prepared themselves to not only survive, but to thrive, to prevail. And they were winning. It was not the Iranians that sought the ceasefire, bringing it in. It was the United States. In fact, Iran was going to reject any effort at a ceasefire because they just simply don't trust the United States. When China pressured them, and China said it's imperative that we bring this conflict to an end because it's impacting our economy. But the Iranians aren't the ones saying, please, 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 let's bring this to an end. They would like to see the war end. They would like to see the sanctions lifted. They would like to see their economy function smoothly. But they're willing to see this to the bitter end. They believe in what they're doing. They the people of Iran were actually quite angry when the ceasefire happened and the negotiating team went to Islamabad. They were in the streets saying, no peace with America, no peace with Israel. And again, some people say, well, wow, that's pretty harsh. They're very violent people. No, they didn't start this war. We attacked them in an event that makes Pearl Harbor pale in comparison. We assassinated their supreme leader. And in the process, we carried out attacks that included a school where we killed 175 innocent civilians. 160 out of them were innocent girls between the age of 6 and 12. This is what we did, and this is what we're doing. This president is, I have trouble coming up with words that I can say in civil company. But this president. Let
me ask you something, Scott, on that point you just raised up here, because I wonder if you can draw some analogies maybe to help our audience understand the impact of this. You mentioned that issue with the schoolgirls getting killed. When the negotiating team flew to Islamabad, they had some artifacts from that time. They had some photographs and some backpacks and shoes and other stuff on board one of the aircraft that were going on there. How important is this? Is this something like there used to be in the U.S., the Remember the Alamo and all that? There's something, this rallying cry. Is anything similar to that going on with the Iranian side?
Oh, this has become one of the defining moments of this conflict. The murder, the assassination of Ali Khamenei is one. The supreme leader who was at home. It doesn't take an intelligence, specialist to track him down. He was at home with his 14-month-old granddaughter when he was murdered in a surprise attack, an act of perfidy. That same morning, a cruise missile struck a school in Manab, in Iran along the southern coast. That the missile that struck, didn't kill everybody, but it caused some damage. The the principal and the surviving teachers rallied the surviving children, and brought them in and took them to the safest place they knew. You know how when you have a tornado in the Midwest, there's the basement or there's someplace, the gymnasium that's deemed to be a safe place. This was the prayer hall. It was the most strongly built portion of the building. They brought the surviving children in and huddled them in while their parents were being called to come and get them. We had another cruise missile flying overhead. These are advanced Block 4 cruise missiles that have retargeting capability. On board, they have a camera that's capturing imagery and broadcasting the imagery back to the command center on the ship, in this case, the USS Vincennes. No, I'm sorry, not the Vincennes. The Vincennes is the one that shot down an airplane and killed 290 people. I'll get the name of the ship in a minute. But the people, the guys on the ship were looking at these images, and they saw, humans clustering in. The imagery is of enough resolution that they could see the painted flowers and the painted playgrounds on the ground. So they knew this was a school. And yet, as the people congregated in, that missile was sent out, redirected, and reattacked, and killed everybody in that building. All the women, the principal died holding children in her arms. Teachers were killed shielding their students from the harm brought by the United States. This was a deliberate act of murder, and the Iranians have identified the commanding officer and the executive officer of the ship involved, and they're calling them out as war criminals, saying these are the guys responsible for murder. This is a big deal. This is a huge deal. This is remember the Alamo. This is, any rallying cry you have. And these are the most innocent. When you go and look at the stories, the Iranians aren't playing propaganda here. There's a lot of Americans, and they disgust me, but every one of those girls there had a backstory. Every one of the children killed there. These were kids with a life. And Iran is a modern nation state. This is not, we hear these people talking about these savages. The president of the United States calls them savages. These girls had more culture and more education than the president would ever have. They have more in their pinky. These are girls who are training to be gymnasts, training to be doctors. They had visions of being lawyers to help their families. One of the girls was in a contest where she would memorize passages from the Quran, and she was 2 weeks away from going to Tehran, the capital city, to enter into a major competition where if she won, it would get her on a pathway where she could be a journalist and do broadcast television. These are the people we killed. We, America, killed them. Our weapons, directed by our officers, taking orders from our leadership. And the Iranians have made this a rallying cry. It disgusts them. It enrages them. And yet they sit there and they have they're just poo-pooed by American negotiators who, frankly speaking, J.D. Vance wasn't there to negotiate a successful outcome. J.D. Vance was there to prolong a deliberate attempt by the United States to reframe what was going on as Iranian desperation. The Iranians weren't desperate. They came very well prepared to have an agreement. They had done their research. They had experts. They had the research papers. They had the facts. They had everything. We came with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff and J.D. Vance and nothing. Yeah, 300 people showed up with nothing, zero. We didn't come in and say, here's our position. Here's what we want. This is how we think. They said, hey, we'll see what you got. No, we reject it, and they walked away. Why? Why are we doing this? I think it's a game being played by the president because, remember, let me make this point too. If we're evaluating what's going on right now from a geopolitical perspective, from a military analytical perspective, from an economic perspective, you're doing it all wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, the only perspective that matters when talking about this conflict is the perspective of Donald Trump's ego. That's all this is about. This is about Donald Trump very concerned that his brand, his legacy is being tarnished, perhaps irreparably and fatally if he can't survive the midterm elections. That's the end of his political legacy. And for a narcissist like Trump to see everything he has built collapse like this and failure is unacceptable. So he needs to deflect responsibility for the failure, his failure in this conflict, onto the shoulders of others. And I think J.D. Vance was thrown out there as a sacrificial lamb. J.D. Vance led the initial team with Witkoff and Kushner. And when the story's finally written, it's going to be Vance was unable to close the deal. Donald Trump, was able to come in and get a deal. I don't think we're going to go on to a next phase of bombing. I could be wrong. I mean, of course, anything can happen. It's a very dangerous situation right now. And as I said, a blockade is an act of war. But the military knows that. What are we going to do? Bomb what? What targets do you want bombed? Because from now on, it becomes a literal, without any debate, war crime, because we'll be bombing civilians, collective punishment, what we're doing. That is a war crime. There's no legitimate military activity to attack. And we can't do it. We're out of weapons, out of precision strike weapons. We're out of ballistic missile defense. So the same situation, the deficiencies and failures that led us to seek a ceasefire are not going to be cured. Iran is stronger. Iran is better. We'll just repeat this scenario. So I don't believe we're going to move into the next phase. I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of political jockeying as Donald Trump seeks desperately to find the perfect sequence of events that allows him to slip in, be the one to negotiate a deal and declare victory and say, I'm the man that did it.
He may have that intention, but evidence is starting to accrue that there has been some pretty profound miscalculations up to this point, which does not give any optimism for how this is going to get resolved anytime near term. And I'd like your view on this. So I think that it's pretty clear now that the initial going in process is that there was this belief among President Trump, which was fed to him by both Israeli and American officials on the inside, that this is going to be something quick. It's going to be like Venezuela. Instead of snatching Maduro, we're going to assassinate Ali Khamenei, and then the other people will be more reasonable, and then they'll talk and they'll give us what we want. We'll take their oil. 2 thumbs up. It's a big victory. That didn't happen. Now all of a sudden there's, oh snap, what do we do now? And then they had to figure out a war plan on the fly. Clearly was not resourced, and they bring another aircraft carrier in. They bring some troops in later. It's just totally disjointed. It appears that there's some evidence that in this negotiation here, he may have meant what you suggested there. He also may have had some idea that because I'm threatening that I'm going to get a submission into what we want here. But now that is failed. And in this soundbite we just showed you, they asked President Trump, what's the play now? Do you think that they're going to come back and you use this as leverage? And you can see in his mind, he's like, sure. Yeah, that sounds good. I read that as, I have no idea what we're going to do next. I guess we got to figure it out on the fly. Do you see any possibility that President Trump literally has no idea what to do next?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that he has no idea what to do next. That everything that's going on right now is to buy time, as he desperately looks for something. This is why I've always said that I think it's the Russians will save the day, because I think the Russians and the Chinese, have a clear vision of what needs to be done to bring an end to this conflict, but also how to balance the needs, wants, and desires of all parties involved, so that you get an equitable outcome. And for Iran, the equitable outcome would be, being allowed to continue to enrich, not to a nuclear bomb, but enrich for a peaceful nuclear program. That is their lawful right. And also the Strait of Hormuz. Iran, may not. The way this could be negotiated is that Iran doesn't get permanent control of the Strait of Hormuz, but because this war was thrust upon them by the United States, Israel, and the Gulf Arab states, that Iran has an inherent right now to seize control and put out a toll to raise money that could be used for reconstruction. I think this is a legitimate thing. It doesn't violate international law if there's an agreement in writing that Iran will, take tolls. And this resolves the issue of the United States having to write a big check for reparations, which is something the Iranians are demanding. For Trump, here's a chance for him to, say he's a peacemaker. I mean, he's already said, I've reset the region like nobody's ever done before. So he can make the argument that this was all necessary for a regional reset, that there was no chance for peace, using the old framework that a war was necessary to shake things up so that you could now come together with a new way of doing business together. China has shown tremendous political acumen. Remember, they're the ones that brought the Iranians and the Saudis together in a rapprochement. The Russians have very good relations with all the parties involved, including the United States, ironically. So I do think that there's a chance for Russia and China to step in and help shape the events. The idea of the United States and Iran successfully carrying out bilateral negotiations, even if moderated by Pakistan, isn't going to happen because it would be too much about, the United States would have to actually posture in a way that leaves no doubt that they lost this war. And that's politically unacceptable to this president. So there's going to have to be some gamesmanship played where, the substance of the outcome is in favor of Iran, but the perception can be balanced so that Donald Trump can declare victory and walk away, because otherwise there's no incentive for him to walk away. He'll desperately be looking for a positive outcome using military resources if there's no guarantee that he can have a positive outcome by seeking peace.
So it seems like though he's walked himself into a near-term trap. It's hard for me. I mean, I can see what you're saying there about that would be a plausible exit, and the fact that he had that in his hand, he could have done that in his past negotiations, but it didn't. We spoke to Professor Morandi earlier this morning, who said that the first couple of sessions of this were actually positive, more than they expected, and then something happened after the second pause and everything went downhill. Well, now then, at that same press conference we just showed you from President Trump a minute ago, now he's saying that it turns out Iran is calling him back and asking for a deal now.
We've been called this morning by the right people, the appropriate people, and they want to work a deal. They would like to work a deal.
Is it your anticipation, Mr. President, that other countries will assist in this effort to blockade Iran and those specific?
Yeah, other countries are going to also.
I mean, now he says that they want a deal, or that they called him, but I mean, just look at a couple of this is Abbas Araghchi, who was one of the chief negotiators from there. He says that in intensive talks at the highest level in 47 years, Iran engaged with the U.S. in good faith to end the war. But when we were just inches away from Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, we incurred maximalist shifting goalposts and blockade, which validates what Professor Morandi told us. Zero lessons learned. Goodwill begets goodwill. Enmity begets enmity. And then Ghalibaf, he posted this also late yesterday. He said, enjoy the current pump figures. Interestingly, he's using a map here. That's Washington, D.C. in the middle. I guess he's trying to point out something. The so-called blockade, soon you'll be nostalgic for $4 or $5 gas. So that doesn't sound like the kind of guys that are going to be calling Trump back this morning and, I don't know, begging him to come back. What do you make of that? Well,
the Iranians have always accused Donald Trump of negotiating with himself, meaning that they're not reaching out. What I believe has happened is that the Iranians have told the Pakistanis that they're willing to continue the negotiations based upon the formula that was being agreed upon, the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. And so it's the Pakistanis that are calling Trump. Trump never said it was the Iranians calling. He said they've reached out, the appropriate people, et cetera. It's the Pakistanis calling them saying, hey, come back to the table. But it's not the Iranians calling. The Iranians right now, they don't need Donald Trump. Now, they would like to have peace on here, but they don't need this. Donald Trump needs this. This is a requirement for Donald Trump. So I think, the fact that there is a deal ready to be made. Understand, Donald Trump couldn't let J.D. Vance be the one who successfully negotiated that deal. Donald Trump shares the glory with nobody. He will share the glory. So J.D. Vance went in there, did all the hard work, got him up to right about the cross line, and then Donald Trump went, kill it. Boom, 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 boom. Hardline position, da-da-da, Netanyahu calls, da-da-da-da, end of negotiations. And now Donald Trump at the appropriate time is going to slide in and he's going to get all the glory. He's going to be the one that closes the deal. But he, in the meantime, he has to posture. Remember, he has to be able to make the case to ignorant Americans who don't know all of the subtleties here that it was his pressure that created the possibility for a deal. See, that was the problem. That they were going to get a deal too easy, and therefore it looked like an American surrender. Can't have that. And so you have to get it up to the finish line, stop, pull J.D. Vance, blame the Iranians, intransigent, blockade, threats, boom, 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 slide back in, close the deal, and say it was only because of our threats that the Iranians finally came across the finish line.
Now that is fascinating because I can definitely see that happen. The fly in that ointment, though, is will the Iranians play ball with that? Because I as you said at the beginning, they don't need a deal here. They want a deal. They don't need one, and they're certainly not going to just like backtrack and say, "All right, we'll give you everything you want so that you can come out looking good." Or do you think that they would? Would the Iranians be willing to let him get public credit if it gets the terms that they need and ends the war?
I don't think Iran cares about domestic American politics. So Donald Trump can sell this any way he wants to the American people. I don't think the Iranians are in a PR game with the United States. The Iranians want very basic things. One, they will continue to enrich uranium. How that's defined, I would imagine, would be similar to the deal that was almost reached before we attacked Iran on February 28th. So we already have a solution to that. That's what the audience needs to understand. This problem's already been solved to the satisfaction of the United States and Israel, closing all possibilities for Iran to develop a nuclear weapon, and yet Iran gets to retain its enrichment capability, which is all they want. The pride of saying, we get to do this. And so that's already resolved. It's just a matter of the president coming in. And here's the president. He can spin it and say, I was able to get the deal that Barack Obama couldn't. Barack Obama could only get the JCPOA, which had sunset clauses and at the end, massive enrichment to as much material as he wanted, out of control. Here, he'll be able to say, no, we permanently shut the door on a pathway to nuclear weapons. This is the best deal. I gave you this deal, a better deal. I told you I would get a better deal than Barack Obama. So there he spends it. The Iranians don't care what he says to the American people. They could care less. What they care about is the end result, continued enrichment. It's the same thing with the Strait of Hormuz. There's a deal to be made there. Whether it's some sort of revenue sharing, some sort of consortium of collecting revenues that are passed out, that allows Iran to retain the physical control of the Strait of Hormuz, but with to be sold in a different way, where the United States gets to say the favorite Donald Trump thing: "I'm making you money. I'm getting revenue from the Strait of Hormuz. America's there. We're seeing everything. We're controlling everything. We're America." And the mouth breathers back in America go, wow, he's the greatest. This is 5D chess. He's awesome. When all it is the Iranians going, give the guy a nickel, make him go away. That's a deal that's there. Missiles, we're not going to touch the missiles. The Iranians are never going to give up the missiles because that's their deterrence. And frankly, we're just going to suck that one up. And that's it. There's the deal right there. It can be made right now, and Donald Trump gets to sell it anyway. When it comes to forces leaving the Middle East, Iran doesn't get to dictate that outcome. However, it's an outcome that's going to happen no matter what. And so Donald Trump gets to say, I reset the region. We now have peace and stability. I can pull the boys home. We don't need to keep them here anymore. See, he makes it look like he did a good thing, when in fact he got his butt kicked and he's retreating. For the Iranians, people say, well, what's in it for Iran? Imagine for the first time in 5 decades being able to get total control of your economy and sell the oil and gas that you produce on the market at fair market value. And the money comes in without restrictions, that you're able to work with the global finance system to get investments coming in, get China coming in without fear of secondary sanctions, getting the Russians coming in without fear of secondary sanctions. And for the Iranian government, for the first time, to deliver on the promise of prosperity to the Iranian people. People say, well, what's in it for Iran? That's it. The better future. This is it. This is the better future that has eluded Iran for 5 decades. It's available now. Iran can join BRICS without restrictions. Iran can become involved in the European Economic Union, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, all without restrictions, able to maximize their economic potential. And Iran will become one of the most, prosperous nations in the region. And that's what's there for the Iranian people. But they're not going to sell their soul to get to that objective.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, because there are some big headwinds against that inside of Iran, because there are we've heard from some experts here just recently that there was a lot of I guess, I don't know if conservative is the right term, but those who are against any of this working with us, because they said we can't trust them at all. They backstabbed us so many times and done all this stuff. So you can't, even if they agree to this stuff, you can't agree to it. We need to try to have a military solution. But so far, I think they call them the reformers, the element, the Galibaf and the Pezeshkian, they have been able to run roughshod because they want that outcome. But like there are headwinds for the Iranian side, there's headwinds for the American side. And for all that stuff you talked about that Trump may be working in his mind to try to get done to somehow twist things around, and no matter how many people got killed, to make him look good. That may be his intent, but there's headwinds here too. Let me just show you a couple here. Here's Mike Pompeo seeming to want to do anything besides have a negotiated settlement. He wants a military victory over Iran.
Iran now has a very difficult decision to make.
Yeah.
It's already had significant resources depleted. It's already found itself in a politically difficult spot with most of its leadership wiped out. But they'll now have the choice to make. President Trump has essentially gone for the jugular. He will cut off essentially all revenue that has been flowing into the Iranian regime. And so now they'll have to decide. But imagine that they fire on an American vessel or American escorted vessel that's moving through. President Trump will unleash even more fury, and that can only put them in a lesser position. So I think President Trump has done a very smart thing. I think this is superior to having put boots on the ground to try and take one of the islands. This will put not only the Iranians but the Chinese in a very difficult spot, where now they will have to buy market-based, market-priced oil or convince the Iranians to stand down and allow the strait to be reopened.
Well, one thing he said right there, it lends some credibility to your theory that maybe we don't want to restart the war here by saying, well, now we don't need to do boots. Just shut down the Strait of Hormuz. That's the thing. We don't have to worry about taking Carg Island anymore. And boy, that's put them in a hard position here. But I don't know that the Iranian side, any of the crews over there, are going to play along with that and give him what he's asking for.
Well, first of all, let's talk about this blockade for a second. How many ships do we have available? 13 ships available. And I'm pretty sure this includes at least one carrier battle group, which means that we have a carrier and then we have the escorts, probably between 3 to 5 ships that are dedicated to this. They're not intercepting any ships. The carrier's doing its thing, and the escorts are providing a picket, air defense picket. It'll probably be reinforced given the fact that Iran is a serious player here, reinforced with other ships. So now what we're looking at, maybe 7, 8 ships maximum to enforce a blockade. Has people looked at a map? Really look at a map? Understand that our ships can't get anywhere near the Strait of Hormuz, because once and a blockade is an act of war. Iran will sink these ships. So now we're going to have to wait till the ships clear the Strait of Hormuz, and then get out into the Indian Ocean. Big ocean, little ships, lots of ships transiting. We're not going to do anything. This blockade is a joke, a straight up joke. And what are we going to do? Board a Chinese ship? Board a Russian ship? This again, we lack the resources to fully do. Mike Pompeo should know this. He should understand this, but he's a propagandist mouthpiece right now instead of doing reality. But again, the job right now of the Pompeos in the world is to create the impression that we have the ability to impose this blockade, and then we're going to threaten it. But watch what happens the first time we get pushback. Trump is going to find a reason to say, I've reconsidered now. They've reached out to me and they've talked to me, and we're going to go ahead and pull back on this blockade here because we think there's a window of opportunity here and all that. We can't do the blockade, Colonel. I mean, it's impossible to do the blockade. We don't have the resources to do it. I know that. What happens when the ships start skirting the Iranian-Pakistani coast? How close do we want to get? Because that's a standard smuggler's route. Now they'll come out and they'll skirt the coast. What, are we going to come in and intercept them in Iranian coastal waters? I don't think so. And even if we tried to get them outside of the coastal waters, they'll sink our ships. We can't do this. The Iranians are not going to just sail out of the Strait of Hormuz, and put a big target on them and sail straight to an American ship saying, here we are, board us. That's not how this works.
Well, it's funny because in the United States, from people who are watching mainstream media and not watching shows like this where we put the actual truth out there, they see a former admiral, Admiral Howard, talk about how not only is this something doable, but our regional allies are cheering it on.
Everyone in the region is cheering how the vice president handled this negotiations, where he gave them a shot. They didn't capitulate. We're done. So all these states, UAE, Qatar, Saudi, Kuwait, they have an existential threat from Iran. And all the components of our demand indicate that. Developing a nuclear weapon, closing the Straits of Hormuz, missile programs, funding their surrogates, all those represent existential threats to them. So they don't want us to go through any negotiations unless all those conditions are met.
Come on, Scott. Those conditions will never be met, what he wants, because they're asking for an abject surrender by the Iranian side. They're not going to. So how do you get to this point to where you're telling and convincing all the American people how great President Trump is and how powerful our military is, and it's going to accomplish these things when it doesn't? And if he tries to walk it back, he's not going to walk back, as you said, he's not going to walk back the nuclear program, the reprocessed material, the long-range missiles, the support from the allies, or full control of the strait. He's revenue sharing is probably the best he can get. How is he going to spin that into something positive when you're claiming everybody's cheering it on?
Well, I mean, Colonel, that puts me in an unfair position because I've always been a fact-based guy. My job as an intelligence officer was never to tell my boss what he or she wanted to hear, was tell them what the hard facts are, and then they get to run with it. I wasn't there to massage their ego. I wasn't there to promote their course of action. My job was to say, these are the facts, and these are how these facts will impact your courses of action. Now earn your pay. I'm not good at the game of spin. I'm not good at the game of up there telling outright lies. But here's the thing. Pompeo and the former admiral know that they're lying. These aren't stupid people. These are people that have played the game. They know exactly what they're doing. And these aren't people that are out there with their own, they didn't formulate these. They're playing from a script. There is a White House script, a narrative that's been farmed out. And these people, their job is to receive that script, get on mainstream TV and say this stuff and get the American people moving in one direction. So their job right now is to create the impression of overwhelming American strength and overwhelming American advantage, so that when the president does make a deal with the Iranians, they'll say it's only because of the strength that this president has shown. And, the Iranians, bent the knee to the reality of American supremacy. That's the game they're playing. Whether or not they'll be able to pull it off is another thing, because the Iranians aren't playing that game. And as you said, there's going to be a gap between reality and perception. But as you know, Colonel, perception creates its own reality. And sadly, with the American people, your audience possibly excluded, we're the most ignorant people in the world today about the world we live in. We don't know anything about this world. So we believe at face value the nonsense, we being the collective, tend to believe the nonsense that's put out there by mainstream media. And therefore we are susceptible to having, our perceptions altered by, narrative shaping. Perceptions create their own reality. So if enough Americans believe that this president is the modern incarnation of Jesus Christ, who can come down, lay hands people and cure them, and therefore, man, he can do anything. I mean, he's better than the Pope. Hell, he put out a picture of himself as the Pope. I'm sorry, I don't mean to go this route, but I'm so irritated about that image.
I X'd out on that, so I'm right with you on that.
Yeah, my brain blew up. But and not from a religious standpoint, because as I've told people before, I'm not the most religious person in the world, not because I don't believe, but because I want to believe, but I look at the world today and I have a hard time connecting the horrors I see on the ground with the concept of a greater good. There's something going on. It's got to be explained to me better. Maybe there's men of faith and women of faith who can do that for me, but I'm not there yet. But I respect people of faith. I respect their faith. But more importantly, as an American, I respect the Constitution of the United States and the vision of the founding fathers. And that James Madison, John Jay, and Alexander Hamilton, the men who wrote the Federalist Papers, these are men of deep faith, and they actually believed that God was driving them, through his, divine spirit. But they never once said, "I am God. I am acting as God." What they said is, God motivated, God inspired us to do this, to make this country. And then Thomas Jefferson wisely came in 1802 in his letter to the Danbury Baptists and said, separation of church and state. We don't have state religion. This president is ignorant of that. He couldn't tell you who Thomas Jefferson was. He doesn't know. I'm just telling you, this is not a smart man. And he doesn't know who Alexander Hamilton is. He doesn't know who, James Madison is, or John Jay. He doesn't know anything about these people. And if he did, he has to understand that that image isn't just an insult to people of faith. And if you're a Christian, I can't imagine you're not hugely offended by this. But this is an insult to every American, because the president of the United States can never wrap himself in the cloak of religious divinity. We have a separation of church and state. It cannot happen. We do not have a supreme leader. And yet that's what he's postured himself as being, a supreme leader. This man is a blasphemist. That's it. I'm sorry. I'm blown up.
No, I get it, man. Believe me, I felt the same way. That's why I said something out on X. People can go look at that if they want to hear my views. Let's take a look at kind of where this leaves us, though. Because there's some near-term issues. I'm going to put back up this comment by Galibov. Where did that one? I think it's this one here, where he seems to be tracking on what's at risk here. He says, enjoy the current pump prices because this blockade is soon going to make you nostalgic for gas. It's only as expensive as it is right now. Because President Trump can try and massage things the way they want, but time is definitely on the Iranian side. They know how to suffer. They're definitely suffering from these bombs that have happened so far, and now then the shut off from the Strait, et cetera. But they're designed that way. I mean, they planned for it is a better way to put it. We, on the other hand, Trump desperately needs this stuff off the table quick because oil price is still above $100 right now, and it's only going to continue to go up if he has this long-term blockade. I mean, he could do the blockade. He can not go in on the ground, but that's not going to defeat Iran. It's not going to do anything more to Iran. Just going to make them sit there and say, how long you want to go? Well, we can't go that long, and then something will have to be done. So how does President Trump square that circle?
He does.
I know. I'm asking you stuff that's not fair again. But
that's the thing. You look at gas prices. I work for a company. I'm not an employee, but I've been writing for them now since 2004. Energy Intelligence. It's they basically, it's a publication company that has a number of publications. Energy Compass, I think, is their flagship. Their clientele are the major energy producing companies of the world. Every year they have a conference called Oil and Money. It sort of explains where they're at, and it's attended by every single CEO of the majors. These guys are the flagship of the energy world, and they do energy security. And that's where I come in. I'm supposed to, I write on issues of energy security. I don't claim to be an economist. I couldn't tell you anything about Keynesian economics. And I don't claim to be a petroleum engineer. There's people out there. But what I am is a geopolitical analyst who understands the global energy market. We have a lot of people out there right now talking about Venezuela and Venezuelan oil. You do know that Venezuela isn't producing that much oil right now. And to get Venezuela to produce oil is going to require years, 5, 10 years, 15 years maybe, to get it up to its potential. So there is no Venezuelan oil available to offset the loss of 22 to 25% of the world's energy resources that are no longer coming out of the Middle East. So there, I hear there's ships flowing into the Caribbean to load up with Venezuelan oil. No, they're not. Literally, they're not. They may be coming in and hope to get access to, energy from the United States. But again, there's a finite level. We're energy self-sufficient, and we can export energy, but we don't have the capacity now to replace what was is being locked out by the Middle East. So this notion that the United States is going to be the world's gas station is absurd. What we're going to become is a place for people to come if they want to pay top dollar to American oil companies. But this is why we had to lift sanctions against Russia, because Russia is a major oil producer. They can export a hell of a lot more oil than we can, and they're going to be making money. In the fact that Russia's making money, I think it's good for Russia. It brings a lot of stability to Russia and all this. And there's no reason why Russia shouldn't make money on the oil market. I mean, they're a sovereign nation. The United States shouldn't have any right to impede. But the policy objectives of the United States in imposing sanctions were to deny Russia access to this income stream, to help, choke off Russia's defense industry, the funding of the defense industry. Trump administration just threw all that out. They're the ones who invented it. They're the ones who invented the policy of sanctioning Russian energy, and yet they just threw it away, which means the Trump administration stands for nothing. There is no foundational ideological, basis for anything they do. It's all about Donald Trump's image, all about his ego. It's all about pleasing the cult of personality that has surrounded him. And that means that we can go anywhere. And, in terms of direction, what's going on, as long as it can be spun to be favorable to the president, all bets are off. Anything can happen.
Right. And now let's take a look at what happens when spin meets reality. Trump can say whatever he wants, but with this big declaration of this oil blockade, there are others. This is in the Russian media here on top, where this is translated into English. But they're saying Beijing warns the United States that the blockade of Hormuz does not apply to Chinese tankers, warning the United States against any interference in the process of their energy supplies. So that leads us to the problem. You talked about how hard it would be if we actually wanted to do a blockade. They could skirt the shoreline, whatever. What happens, Scott, if the Chinese says, you know what, I ain't skirting anything. I'm going right down the middle, and I'm going to come out and dare you to stop my ship. What happens if we do?
Well, you're a student of the Bible, Colonel. What happened when Moses went to the Red Sea? It parted. And that's what the United States Navy will do. It will part, and we will do nothing, and nor will we interdict. There's less demand for it, but Russian tankers, I don't see. But Chinese, look, one of the first things that happened when this ceasefire came in is that China and Pakistan went in and signed a whole bunch of deals with Iran to get energy. China desperately needs the spigot to be turned back on. They need Iranian energy to be flowing. This is essential for their economic stability. This is an existential issue for the Chinese and for the Americans out there that, like me, struggle with words with multiple syllables. That means this is life and death, literally life and death. The Chinese have worked too hard and too long to build up the economic reality that they have. They are thriving. They are prospering. If you guys don't believe me, go to China. You'll be shocked by what you see. High-speed trains that actually work at high speed, cities that are clean, modern, well lit. Are there problems in China? Sure, there are. And if you look hard enough, you can find them. Just like here, I don't have to look very hard. I can go right out my front yard and find a whole bunch of problems with the infrastructure in modern day America. But the Chinese are doing all right. But in order to do that, they have a model that requires a certain level of energy consumption on a reliable basis. That's called energy security. And, I think one of the things we're going to see from the Chinese is that they will never again allow themselves to be in a position where, this significant percentage of their energy supplies can be put at risk. You're going to see a whole bunch of new pipeline deals with Russia and things of that nature. But right now they need the Iranian energy. We're not going to, if we stop them, we are literally talking about a war with China. Now, I want to remind the American people too that in case you think that the Taiwanese are going to be on our side long term, one of the things that happened here is that Taiwan understands the United States can never secure it, that the United States provides no security at all. The head of the opposition party, and that's the opposition party only in terms of the presidency, Kuomintang party, they're the majority party, or they're part of a majority coalition in the parliament, just flew to mainland China, where she met with Xi Jinping, the president of China, who's now talking about the possibility of a visit to Taiwan. It's over, ladies and gentlemen. It's over. We lost. And we're losing everywhere because of this energy. South Korea, 43, I think it's 43% of their energy comes from the Middle East. Imagine losing 43%. The Japanese are worse. 93% of their energy comes from the Middle East. They're shutting down. Australia, no diesel. And you've looked at Australia. All the cities are on the coast, which means that trucks, big ass trucks, excuse my language, big trucks have to drive across. Trucks use diesel. And when you don't have any diesel, trucks don't drive. And when trucks don't drive, goods don't get to the stores and the store shelves are empty. That's Australia. Great American ally. You guys know about AUKUS, Australia, United Kingdom, United States, the big tripartite alliance that was supposed to create nuclear submarines to deter the Chinese. Well, there ain't no AUKUS anymore. The UK's done with us. They're not playing that game anymore. And Australia just realized that we're nothing. America provides nothing but harm. That's the end of that. We ruined the tripartite relationship with South Korea and Japan. We've ruined the AUKUS relationship. We're ruining everything. NATO, gone. I mean, this is I call it an empire termination event, this war with Iran. The ramifications of our defeat in Iran are mind-boggling. But again, most Americans probably didn't understand a word I just said.
Yeah, well, they'll know soon enough when the ramifications start to come out, and then they can't be spun anymore. But we'll see how that's going to manifest itself. Let me, in the last few minutes we have, you mentioned Russia and NATO. With all the focus on this war here for the last 6+ weeks, there hadn't been a lot of focus on what's been going on in Russia, Ukraine. And it looks like that the Russians have, it was also during the rainy season, so there wasn't a lot of movement, but there still has been some pretty consistent, at least positional battles that have been going on. But there's growing evidence that there could be either a late spring or early summer offensive by the Russian side, which could be their biggest offensive of the war. What can you tell us about the status of the Ukraine war, and what impact has this war had on Ukraine's portion in it?
Well, let's just start. First of all, Ukraine has been blown off the headlines. The war hasn't stopped. I can tell you right now, the war is going on with the same level of intensity as before, even more so. While we've been focused on Iran, Ukraine has been trying to launch a number of counterattacks regionally to gain. Their goal is to show that they have the ability to continue to resist, to push back the Russians, to justify continued expenditures by Europe, the NATO, and hopefully motivate the United States. The only thing that's happened is that the Russians have slaughtered tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and destroyed hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles without losing significant territory. The Russians have this, when you look at a map there, it's not, a single line here. You have, the blue, which is the Ukrainians. You have the red, which is the Russians. In the middle, you have a gray zone. And that gray zone is sort of like a no man's land. So these Ukrainian advances are advances into the gray zone. They don't penetrate into the red zone. And as they come through the gray zone, this is part of Russian defensive doctrine to absorb the attack. They have lead elements in the first line of defense, second line, and third line of defense, all of which are designed to yield, bring them into a fire trap where they die. And the Russians have been very good at killing the Ukrainians, slaughtering them by the tens of thousands every week. Ukraine is running out of resources. The Russians are shaping the battlefield. Even in this bad weather, Russia is moving in. If you take a look every day, they're seizing this tree line. They're seizing this village, which gives them a geographical advantage. They're securing this line of communication. And what's going to happen is this summer, once the weather gets better, there's sort of an urban belt that's left in the Donbass. Kramatorsk and Slavyansk are two of the major cities there, and the Russians are closing in on that. You're going to see the Russians seize these cities before the summer ends, and when that happens, the Ukrainian position in the Donbass collapses, and that now where the Russians say we will never. The Ukrainians will never give up the Donbass. Well, you don't need to. The Russians will own it. They'll have it. You'll be kicked out. Then they'll just continue to advance. This war doesn't end until Ukraine capitulates completely. And what's happening right now is that the Russians have all the advantages. Another interesting thing is just drone warfare. The fact that we just don't have a clue what the reality of warfare is today. I'm actually going to be going back to Russia in June, and I can't get into the details, but I'm going to be doing a very big program on drone warfare to try and capture it and understand it so that I can bring it back and tell the American people and tell the Europeans too, if you think you're going up against the Russians, you're not. You won't survive a day. An American armored division would be completely attrited within 3 to 5 days of contact with the Russians without doing any meaningful harm on the Russians, because the reality of drone warfare and the intensity of drone conflict. it's an interesting topic. One that we should be knowledgeable of, not because I want to, position us to defeat the Russians. I want us to say that war isn't the answer.
Yeah.
Right now, there's too many people that think, oh, we're just going to go to military power. Well, we're not. War isn't the answer. And in this case, it's just like with Iran, where I tried to tell as many people as possible, their missiles will bring down death and destruction on anybody who goes against them. And we're not going to be able to stop their missiles. I'm telling you right now, if we go to war with Russia, their drones will slaughter us. I mean, the Ukrainians, who are very good at drone warfare, participated in a series of NATO exercises, and small Ukrainian hunter-killer drone teams stopped a NATO armor advance before it even got started. The NATO guys didn't even know how to begin to operate there. And the Navy side, halfway through the exercise, the Allied commanders are like complaining to Ukraine, "Where are you?" They're like, "We've already sunk all your ships. We've been bouncing drones off your hulls for the last several hours. You just don't notice it." And this is the reality of drone warfare today. And the Ukrainians are very good at
it. Though. That baffles me. You're an intelligence officer. You talked earlier in this show about your job is to tell policymakers the truth, and they can make whatever decision they want with it. How can it be that I thought that when this war started off, I thought Russia was a little bit behind the 8 ball with drone warfare, given the 2020 war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, where it was really demonstrated. I thought Russia would have been further along. They weren't, but they figured it out pretty quick. And then they've just gone through iterations. Ukraine been on the up, the Russians have, et cetera. But now then we've got 4 full years of observation about the realities you just talked about here. And it should be painfully aware to everybody in NATO, and especially the United States, who's supposed to be paying attention to this stuff. But so far, all I've seen is Pete Hegseth make a couple of videos about how cool it was in front of the Pentagon that one time and had drones following him. And then they have this, I saw one contracted the last month, I think it was, to where we're going to get 300,000 drones in some period of time. And I'm like, wait a minute, the Russians make that much in like about a month, I think. If you don't have something that's already at scale, you can't even dream about going up on a head-to-head notice with the Russians anywhere. And yet I don't see us doing that. How can you explain that?
Well, first of all, that 1,000 drones is the Shahed drones, which Russia now produces. That's just of the Shahed 136 variant. Russia now does the Geranium 5, 6, more advanced models. The Russians are producing several thousand of these strategic drones a day. So people understand, they on their big days against Ukraine, they'll fire 700, 800. That means that they still have 200 a day they're putting into storage. On the normal day, they're firing 250, which means 750 plus are going into storage. Russia has accumulated close to 100,000 strategic drones that are able to be used against the West, and we have no defense, literally no defense against them. So they've already won the strategic war on that. The tactical drones, first of all, we see these quadcopters, right? Yeah. You got one in your back. They're running around doing their stuff. But there's, the Russians have several different variations, and so do the Ukrainians. They have something called the Molina, which is like a giant, RV, RV controlled aircraft. But that goes out there and it does tremendous damage attacking in the depth. And they have the other. Man, I'm blowing up my brain. They have another one that goes out and does the same thing. But the point is, the Russians can control and dominate the battlefield from the line of contact all the way out to 50 to 70 kilometers deep. That means anything operating in that zone is going to be located and struck by a Russian drone. But here's the thing: you say, why isn't America catching up? Well, we'll take Sergeant. I don't know. We'll give him a name. We'll just call him Ivan. Why not? He's Russian. He's Ivan. Sergeant Ivan's out there with his drone team, and they have a 3D printer that's printing out drone parts, and then their guys at the front assemble them using different components. But let's say yesterday the Ukrainians did something that the Russians noticed their drones are going out and were getting deviated. They collected the intelligence instead of reporting back to the Pentagon and saying, hey, something happened. Could you get a Tiger team together to look at this? And then 6 months later, Defense Industry says, here's the fix. And they put it down. The sergeant right there starts tinkering and they send out a drone. It didn't work. It veered off, blew up. Give me another drone. They send out, he can send out 15 drones and until he gets the solution. And then he, writes it down, radios it out, and other people are doing the solution. And now they got the fix. And they'll get the fix the same day the problem manifests itself. But you heard what I just said. The sergeant expended 15 drones. Could you imagine Lance Corporal Schmuckatelli in the Marine Corps going out there and blowing through 15 drones? I mean, I've been there when we signed stuff out to Marines. And if I signed something to a Marine, I said, here's a $2,000 drone. What are you going to do with it? So I'm going to crash it, experimenting. No, he won't, because he's going to be scared. He'd be like, I can't crash it. I'm signed for it. I'm responsible for this.
Right.
We have to change this, Kurt. You know how this works. You see it. We have to change the mindset. We have to empower that Lance Corporal to make decisions right now that are only made by 3-star generals. We have to push down the decision-making capability in drone warfare, because you don't have time in drone warfare to collect information, push it back up to a Tiger team, defense industry gets together, and then they come down. That takes months to do that. We saw that with the defeating the IED campaign. It took too long to respond. What you need to do is push down the innovation right there on the ground level and trust the sergeant and the lieutenant and the captain to know their business. And that's what the Russians and the Ukrainians have done. This is why the innovation is taking place. We are so far behind. We are sitting there fighting drone warfare that's 2 years old. We're looking at 2 years old doctrine. We don't comprehend what's happening right now. And until we change our mindset, until we allow Lance Corporal Schmuckatelli to go out there and just blow through 15 drones a day, experimenting, having fun. Just go out there and have fun. You can just see the commanding officer freak out. What do you mean 15 drones? They're $2,000. He just blew through $30,000 worth of drones. We can't have that. No, you have to have that. Yeah. Money cannot be the issue. And, just go ahead and stop building an aircraft carrier. Take all that money from the aircraft carrier, put it into drone. This is what the Russians did. They've created a drone branch. We have infantry, we have artillery, we have armor. They now have infantry, artillery, armor, and drones. The drone branch that operates. They have a special unit, Rubicon, that hunts and kills things. It's hats off to the Russians. This is why I want to go and capture what they're doing, so the American people can better understand the reality of drone warfare.
And in fact, this is showing you what the Russians are doing specifically on the fiber optic drones. This is as of last September, but the Russia were producing 50,000 of those drones per month, and I've seen some reports to suggest that it's actually higher rate than that right now, and we're not doing a shred of that. We don't even have that postponed in there. So I just still, though, there has to be other guys like you, and you will stay with the Marine Corps, that are saying, excuse me, sir, but we're way behind the power curve here. I'm looking at the intelligence like I'm supposed to on the Russian side, on the Ukrainian side. They're doing all the stuff that you just said, open source. Shouldn't someone be telling the 3-star generals like you're talking about there that, hey, we have to make some massive changes immediately if we even have a prayer of holding our own if we get into a war with these guys?
There should be, but we have to change the fiscal approach. Not to when I was a lieutenant, I got arrested and was going to be put in jail because I did invasion. I went out and I went to Defense Logistic Agency in Mojave and got excess radio. You know how when you order the new radios, there's always some that don't get issued out, and so they send it to Mojave. So I said, what the hell are you doing with these radios? They said, well, they're just sitting here. I said, I'll sign for them. I built my own Humvee with radios communicating with drones. I'm the guy that helped invent the initial adjustment of artillery from drones before we had GPS and all this. I got radars to communicate with the drones, radars to communicate directly with. Combined it all in. And I did it all because I was an innovative battalion S2. I also ended up obligating millions of dollars of R&D money I wasn't authorized to obligate. I didn't realize it. I just thought I could go to place and sign for something and magic things happened. And when the bill came to Headquarters Marine Corps, they were looking for me. And
explain that to you.
Yeah, they sent me to flight school first of all. That's how I got to be an aerial observer because they were going to grab me and court-martial me, but my commander said, "Well, he's in flight school; it's a high-profile school. Why don't we let him finish and then we'll talk to him?" And they took the 4 months that I was away to calm down. And when I came back, they attested what I did, and it all worked. And they realized, okay, we're going to give it to the right people. And I just got yelled at. But But my point is, that's the kind of innovation you need if you're going to succeed. Had I not done this, had I done it the Marine Corps way, we wouldn't have been directing artillery fire from drones. The battleship Missouri during Desert Storm was directing fire using drones, using the tactics that were developed in 29 Palms. Had we done it the normal way, we may not have been there at that time. This is the kind of thing we have to stop threatening people to put them in jail. Maybe we don't let lieutenants sign for $3 million worth of stuff, but maybe what we do is create the budget so that lieutenants can sign for $3 million, and we don't blink. We don't worry about it. We go, no, let them. You failed? That's okay. Did you learn? Good. Move on. We have to stop making the expenditure of money problematic. We have to let these guys at the junior level do their job. They're the ones who know. They're the ones who are out there. They understand what's going on. The people up in the Pentagon, the people in defense contractors, they only care about the dollars. They only care about the big bucks. They care about the contracts. We want success. We have to empower the people at the tactical level to do this stuff, or else we're never going to catch up. The Russians have the laboratory of war. We're in a peacetime environment. We'll never catch up in a peacetime environment.
Right. No, never. And of course, I'm on the same sheet of music as you. I am definitely not advocating for us to get ready to go to war with Russia or China or anybody else. But I also want us to have a good self-defense capacity. And right now we don't. I fear, and I'd like your view on this, is I know I've got you a little bit over time already, but I fear that we could be setting up a situation like the French did in World War II, where they thought they were the dominant military power on the European continent, and they basically just did World War I better. Whereas the Germans were saying, no, they're doing all kinds of things to modernize their forces. They lowered down the power to the lower unit commanders, and they didn't put everything at the top. The French specifically did. And then when May 1940 came, the Germans came and they had one breakthrough on there, and the whole place collapsed on the other side. Literally, the entire British-French army. And France lost about 2 weeks. Their entire country they lost because they were too. Their brains were not sophisticated enough to be fluid enough. They're still thinking World War I, slow, methodic, etc. The Germans were quicker than mentally and thinking. And right now, you tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I think that if the Russians, and maybe even the Chinese for that matter, because they seem to be paying more attention, if we went up against somebody commensurate right that, whatever it says on paper, the mental acuity of the Russian side is like light years ahead of where we are.
Yeah, it's, the Chinese right now are not combat tested. So I think they're very innovative, but as you know, the best laid plans, nothing survives initial contact with the enemy, except that having been in initial contact with the enemy, it's no longer initial contact with the enemy, meaning you're doing combat-proven tactics. That's the Russians today. If we ever face the Russians on the battlefield, this will not be their day one. This is their day, 1,400. It's our day one. We will all die. That is a guarantee. We do not have the tactics capable of surviving on a modern battlefield. If we go up against the Russians, they will decimate us. We still think in terms of armor brigade employment like we did during the Cold War. That's not how it works nowadays. And if we don't have drones do everything. They serve as cavalry. They serve as screens. They do deep strike. They do intelligence collection. Drones are fire support. When you do an assault, a drone unit comes with you and is out there doing support. If you haven't integrated this all in, you're going to die. And if the United States goes to war with an enemy like Russia or the Chinese, again, like I said, the Chinese, that'll be their day one too. They'll have lessons to learn. But the Russians, they've already learned all their lessons, and we're not going to teach them anything. We're just going to die.
Let's hope that stays theoretical, because I don't want us to go up against them at all, and I don't want anyone to die. But we're not doing we're not earning our money right now. Our leaders aren't. That's the bottom line. And we appreciate you bringing that illuminating that, because we need to have that done. But as always, Scott, we really appreciate you coming on to these truths, these Marine Corps truths. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And we also appreciate you guys. Thanks for being with us today. We've had quite a few shows. We got at least 3 more tomorrow. We'll see what happens. If anything happens overnight, we'll always bring that to you. But we're always grateful for you and appreciate you. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. You know, I don't try to talk you into buying gold or tell you how to run your stock portfolio, but there is a way you can help us. Subscribe, hit that like button, and share this with somebody you love.